Well, good afternoon, sister. I would like to speak to the nun who dropped her tray just now.
She's safe with me. I'm dealing with the situation
I'm
here.
sure you are, Sister Agnes, but I must see her myself.
I hardly think a dropped tray should concern the Dean of the College of Cardinals.
Even so,
The welfare of the sister is my responsibility.
And this conclave is mine.
Hello there. Have you fallen into an open manhole recently? Do you find yourself in the company of strangers? Well, then you might very well be in the feature underground. My name is, as always, Hunter Lanier, and I'm here yet again with another review of an upcoming movie. This time it is Conclave, directed by Edward Berger, starring Ralph Fiennes, Isabella Rossellini, John Lithgow, Stanley Tucci. A lot of people are in this movie. This movie is also apparently one of the frontrunners for Best Picture this year, or next year, technically. So that makes it a little bit of an interesting one to talk about. Of all the story conceits, power vacuums might be one of my favorite. Now, the thing about the term power vacuum is that most people focus on the first word, power. But it's really the second word that's the interesting part. Because what a power vacuum does is that it sucks out all of the deepest, most buried grotesqueries lurking at the bottom of the human soul. Now, the most modern, culturally relevant example of a power vacuum storyline is, I think, Game of Thrones. But Game of Thrones tells its story, in an epic, sprawling saga. Conclave takes the opposite approach. Its story is very compact, very secluded, and muted by hundreds of years of bureaucratic tradition. So if you're not familiar with the story, I'll touch on it briefly. I don't like to get into plot stuff in my reviews. But essentially, the Pope suddenly dies, and Cardinal Lawrence, played by Ralph Fiennes, is chosen to be the MC of the coming conclave, where a new pope will be voted on and chosen. And I won't go into any of the twists and turns, because that's largely where the movie puts its chips. What I want to talk about first is that, on one level, this movie is about power and institutions. And though it's not the most eloquent story, it is, I think, a highly effective one. It's effective because it gets its point across in an audience-friendly way, opting for a Real Housewives-esque drama, backstabbings, scandals, last-minute revelations, side eyes, comical reaction shots, over academic obtuseness and moralizing. We find that no matter how smartly someone is dressed, no matter how ancient their workplace, no matter how influential their station, no matter how omnipotent their boss, they are just people, and suitably flawed. Some in more consequential ways than others. And since being part of a conclave means the cardinals, the voting cardinals, have to be secluded from the outside world, the Vatican ends up turning into this sort of all-boys camp. Rumors spread, cliques form at the cafeteria, and we see how quickly the potential of becoming Pope, becoming one of the most famous people in the world, how much that changes people, or maybe just reveals them. The exception to the rule is Fiennes' character, Cardinal Lawrence, who serves as the story's moral fulcrum. Though not without his own faults, surely, he does seem to be the one that's best equipped to being Pope. Because, as in all power vacuums, and as the movie points out itself, the one who wants power the least is typically the one who is most deserving of power, and vice versa. It's the unfortunate irony of all election cycles, as in the autumn of 2024 is most apparent. I'd like to interrupt myself, if I can, for a moment, to remind you to like the video if you do like it, if you like what I have to say, or more importantly, if you like the way I say it. I try to be thoughtful, I try to be interesting in these reviews, so if you're into that, give me a like. It helps put the video in front of other people. And also subscribe if you're not subscribed. I have more reviews coming. We're in the height of Oscar season, so a lot of really good movies are coming out, and I will be doing reviews on as many that catch my fancy, which are a lot. I have a review of Memoirs of a Snail coming up very soon. Now you may proceed with me. Another aspect of the movie that I really enjoyed, one that's less political and more personal, is that the movie really understands and indulges in the infinite complexity of individuals, which stands in contrast to the church, which is a mass, or any institution. In fact, Fiennes' character has a great speech near the beginning of the movie where he says that he hopes that the next pope, whoever it may be, is a sinner and actively doubts his faith. Not because those are valuable qualities in a pope, but because any man who says that he isn't either of those things can add a liar to his list of titles as well. After all, no one is perfect. But what Fiennes' character soon finds out is just how expansive the variety of imperfections available to man actually are. Finding a pope that seems suitable to head the church and to meet the ideals is like walking into the forest and trying to find a perfectly round stone. As Fiennes' character tries to manage the conclave, all while dealing with this constant ticker tape of gossip and his own struggling faith, he specifically refers to his growing difficulty with prayer. The movie actually becomes something of a comedy, as you may have noticed in my subtitle for this video. It's not an over-the-top satire of incompetent people in positions of power, like, say, a Dr. Strangelove.
Well, now, what happened is one of our base commanders, he had a sort of, well, he went a little funny in the head. You know, just a little funny. And he went and did a silly thing. Well, I'll tell you what he did. He ordered his planes to attack your country. Well, let me finish, Dmitri.
But there are a multitude of moments in the movie where you can't help but laugh at Fiennes' expression after finding out the latest gossip on leading candidate number 3. That said, a large chunk of the movie isn't nearly as straight-faced. And that brings us to what I think, for me, is the movie's Achilles heel. Now, before watching it, I had heard that this is a frontrunner for Best Picture. Now that I have seen it, I know why. It's very much one of those over-directed dramas filled with very obvious cues. It's made abundantly clear when you're supposed to laugh, when you're supposed to cry, and when you're supposed to cheer. This blunt style of storytelling, of direction, is a huge turnoff for me. But, of course, it broadens the movie's appeal to a larger audience that's less picky about this sort of thing, while still having nuanced performances by great actors and a highbrow subject matter. When you combine that with the Real Housewives of Vatican City drama, you get a clear Best Picture contender. Now, that's not to say that the entire movie holds your hand. I think Berger might be the culprit here. As hinted at before, there's not a single thing wrong with any performance in this movie. The standouts being Ralph Fiennes and Isabella Rossellini. The latter having significantly less screen time, but just soaking up all the attention when she is there. And I've got to say, just on a purely superficial film buff level, it is just sort of enjoyable to see the daughter of two legends on screen. And the fact that she looks so much like Ingrid Bergman, it's kind of surreal to see someone that looks so much, if you squint your eyes, it looks like you're watching Ingrid Bergman in a movie in 2024. So that's cool. Now for the screenplay, it's always hard to talk about screenplays when reviewing movies because the screenplay has to go through so many filters before it gets to the screen. You don't know what's actually the screenplay and what happened along the way. But there are several small moments in this movie that I think are worthy of praise. Little bits of dialogue, clumsy endings to scenes, and I mean clumsy in a good way, just little unusual choices. And these are all seem to be at odds with the rest of the movie that seems very, as I said before, blunt. That I have to imagine they just kind of made it past the Berger filter. But that's just conjecture. I could be totally wrong. They could have all been his idea. Speaking of the screenplay, a lot of the banter in the movie I think is really well written. And the movie seems to do a pretty good job, and this is combined with the performances of knowing when to hold back, knowing when to give you something. But that said, there is a pretty pivotal speech in this movie that I just don't think is very well written or very convincing or up to snuff for what the speech is supposed to do for the story. And it's certainly not as poignant as Ralph Fiennes' speech earlier in the movie. All right, well, those were my thoughts. Go down to the comments. Let me know what your thoughts are on my thoughts. Let me know if you're interested in seeing the movie. Once you see it, come back here, give me your opinion. Let's talk about it. As always, I'm interested in hearing your opinion if it is different to mine. You know, as they say, there are 360 ways to see an elephant. I imagine there are an infinite amount more when it comes to movies. I should have a review of Memoirs of a Snail coming out very soon. Just as a little teaser for Memoirs of a Snail, I think that is one of the very best movies I have seen all year. And I'll say goodbye. But before I say goodbye, or after I say goodbye, because I just said goodbye, I have to leave you once more with the unrefutable truth that every day underground is a good day.
Father Bellini.
Aldo.
Am I the last?
Not quite. How are you?
Oh, well, you know, fairly dreadful. Have you seen the papers? Apparently it's already decided it's to be me.
And I happen to agree with them.
What if I don't want it? No sane man would want the papacy.
Some of our colleagues seem to want it.
What if I know in my heart that I am not worthy?
You are more worthy than any of us.
I'm not.
Well, then tell your supporters not to vote for you, to pass the chalice.
And let it go to him? I could never live with myself.